We're joined on the line by Alex Epstein. He's an energy expert who argues that human flourishing should be the guiding principle of energy and environmental progress, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and the creator of EnergyTalkingPoints.com, a source for well-referenced talking points on energy, environmental, and climate issues. You can follow him on Twitter at Alex Epstein. Alex, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, great to be here.
So, Alex, let's talk about what the heck is going on in Texas. The media obviously have a very large stake in claiming that what is going on in Texas is the fault of, I guess, reliable sources of energy alone, that it's coal, it's natural gas, it's nuclear power, that really, apparently, what the world needs is more windmills. I'm not kidding. The Washington Post wrote an editorial saying that what just happened in Texas proves the need for a Green New Deal. I cannot imagine something stupider than that, given that the windmills completely failed in Texas. Can you explain what exactly happened in Texas? Because failure has many parents, but the solution is clearly not what they're talking about here.
Right. I think it's important to note what happened around the country, which is basically it got cold in a lot of places. In every single place it got cold, there was a common trend. Wind and solar went totally out to lunch. And it's not just that the wind turbines froze. That's a very minor thing. It's that the wind wasn't blowing. That's why I call wind and solar unreliables, because they're not there often when you need them the most. So what happened is that nuclear and fossil fuels, what I call the reliables, they were doing all the heavy lifting everywhere in the country. I've posted this on Twitter. You can look anywhere, the Northeast, New England, New York, Midwest, Southwest, everywhere. Fossil fuels are the atlas that's holding up our country. And that is also true in Texas. If you look at what happened in Texas, fossil fuels were dramatically ramping up. Wind had been dominant in Texas like a week before. And so natural gas was low. And then natural gas heroically ramped up to these enormous levels. That's the most flexible source of power. And then you see a crash. But you see the crash is a crash of natural gas mostly. But where were wind and solar? They were even more out to lunch. And so if you look at the chronology of this, it's not fully understood, but the root cause is very clear. America is having systemic problems with reliability. We know more than ever about how to generate reliable electricity, but we have less reliable electricity than ever, including where I live in California. And the reason is because policy today rewards unreliability and punishes reliability. That is the fundamental that's causing systemic problems.
It's pretty amazing to watch as the media spin this, because their spin has been, well, wind doesn't really comprise that much of Texas's energy in the first place. So if wind fails, then it's really only going to hurt them like a little. But if all of the other sources of energy fail, then it's going to hurt them a lot. Well, there's a counter side to that, which is you're asking the reliable sources of energy, as you put it, to pick up all the slack for the failure of wind and solar. And you haven't built anything new in those areas, particularly when it comes to coal plants, for a very, very long time, but nuclear plants as well.
Yeah, you've shut down coal plants. And I posted on Twitter the statistics. It's super scary if you look at what's actually supporting our electricity and what's not. Texas is much better in terms of its plans than the rest of the country. It's planning 0 new nuclear plants, 0 new coal plants. I think it's planning to shut them down. 9.4 gigawatts of wind. So that's a basically 1/3 increase in wind that did nothing. Then 12 gigawatts of solar, which is a huge increase in solar that did nothing. And then 5 gigawatts of gas, which is basically just to handle the ups and downs of the wind and solar. So we see Texas going in a certain direction that is more unreliables, less reliables. And one thing people don't know is the more you focus on unreliables, the more the reliables have to suffer because they have to go up and down to accommodate the unreliables. Also, you lose focus on maintenance and resilience. That's what happened in California. We didn't maintain our power lines because we were already paying so much for green energy. Same thing in Texas. The more you pay exorbitantly for green energy, the less focus and resources you have for reliability.
So in the end, who's to blame for all of this, and how does it get solved? Because it seems like the push from Republicans is, we have to redirect our energies from these unreliable sources of energy back to reliable sources of energy. But the media are really propagandizing hard on behalf of wind and solar. It really is pretty impressive. As soon as you say that wind and solar failed here, they immediately come back at, well, wind and solar weren't that big a deal in the first place, so why are you focusing on wind and solar? Really, this is the fault of natural gas and coal. I mean, Brianna Keilar at CNN was quoting Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, suggesting that this is why we need a Green New Deal, which is kind of insane. It's like going up to somebody who just had a heart attack and saying, here's why you need some more butter.
Yeah, so I think we need to make a distinction. It's not that wind and solar failed, specifically not that the wind turbines froze, and that's the main problem. It's that policies designed to promote wind and solar failed because they made us overly dependent on these unreliable sources, and they took resources and focus away from reliable resources. So what we need is systemic change in terms of policy, and we need to stop all the policies that punish reliability and reward unreliability. So one of these is the wind production tax credit, which Republicans and Democrats insist on passing decade after decade. That gives a premium price to unreliable wind and unreliable solar. Also, grids around the country, Texas and nationally, they have very unfair payment policies that reward unreliability because they hold these totally fake competitions every 5 minutes, and they give money to the people who offer the lowest price on a 5-minute interval. What needs to happen is you need to make decisions not by these 5-minute intervals, but by long-term system costs. And when you make decisions by long-term system costs, that's when you get nuclear, that's when you get gas, that's when you get coal, and you wouldn't have all these unreliables. That's the real reform that's necessary.
That's Alex Epstein, energy expert. His book is The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. He's the creator of EnergyTalkingPoints.com. He's an excellent source on this sort of stuff for sure. Alex, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ben.